McLaren has designed a front suspension suitable for Norris, and in today's video we are going to explain why Piastri is not comfortable with this new suspension.
At the Goodwood Festival, Prost shared his thoughts on McLaren's situation, expressing his hope for them to win the World Championship.
The statement carries weight coming from a four-time world champion. However, we must also consider the filming day of Racing Bulls that occurred yesterday. Let's hear what Laurent Mechi wants to bring, starting from Spa. For Red Bull, the new main team already has a strategy in mind to implement. Lastly, let's discuss the Ferrari power unit, Franco Colapinto and Felipe Massa. Before we start, please, leave a supportive like, and now let's see everything in detail. Lando Norris started the season complaining about the lack of feeling with the McLaren MCL 39, especially on the front. A problem that has limited his confidence in the car and his effectiveness in qualifying, where last year he made a difference in decisive moments. McLaren took the matter seriously, working immediately to restore his proper feelings behind the wheel. After targeted interventions post-Suzuka in Canada, a new mechanical configuration of the front suspension arrived, designed to improve steering feedback and sensitivity when entering curves. This is a modification that doesn't change pure performance, but affects the mechanical behavior of the upper triangle, making the steering response more natural. Oscar Piastri, who has never complained of similar problems, chose not to try it, preferring to maintain a standard setup. Andrea Stella explained that the varied parts used by the two drivers don't hinder data analysis or internal comparisons, but it only involves a more complex organization in the management of the parts. The possibility remains open to extend the solution to Piastri if necessary. The modification has restored some of the confidence Norris lost at the start of the season, showing encouraging results. We witnessed it with the triumphs in Austria and Silverstone. And for McLaren, this is a positive sign looking forward to the next races, even though the management of custom setups could remain until the end of the year. And be careful not to underestimate this element, because in a fight for the World Championship with only a 4-point difference from the first two drivers, 234 points for Piastri, 226 for Norris. And where in the last races, Norris did better, but before that, Piastri did better. Let's remember the 3 consecutive victories in Bahrain, Jeddah, and Miami by the same Oscar. Well, in such a tense situation at McLaren where every point makes a difference, when you bring an update that favors one driver over the other, even this small update to the front suspension at the upper triangle can really make a difference. And it determines who could be a world champion compared to the other. Of course, obviously, then it's the individual episodes in the different races that affect the final result. However, being more comfortable with the single-seater allows you to drive faster and avoid potential issues during the race. He has the best chance of starting from pole position. So the update that McLaren made on the front suspension that favored Norris shows us how once again the English team favors the Brit. Then rightly so, Piastri has all the elements at his disposal to be able to reach Norris, and this was also reiterated by Andrea Stella to avoid creating favoritism. And in favor of Oscar Piastri, it's the same. Alain Prost, 4-time world champion. In fact, during the Goodwood Speed Festival, Alain Prost openly declared his preference between the two McLaren drivers. The 4-time world champion explained that he knows Oscar Piastri well, having pushed for his entry into the Renault Academy in the past. Then Alpine, despite the internal skepticism of the team. Prost recounted that he has followed Piastri since his early steps in Formula 4 and immediately appreciated his intelligence in the race. According to him, the Australian has a clarity in maneuvers and an ability to read situations that make him smarter than Norris. Qualities that could make the difference in the race for the title. According to Prost, drivers who rely solely on talent risk stopping, while those with tactical intelligence can grow more. However, he added that in such a tight world championship, the track will decide who deserves to win. Piastri, today's championship leader with 8 points over Norris, left Alpine in 2023 after a contractual dispute to move to McLaren. He chose to debut in Formula 1 with the Woking team, securing a starting position. For its part, McLaren has chosen not to impose team orders, as confirmed by Zak Brown after the incident in Canada, which saw Norris and Piastri clash with Piastri's 4th place and Norris's subsequent withdrawal. And Zak? Brown reiterated that the two can fight freely as long as they respect the team's rules and without risking valuable points. McLaren's goal is to maintain an internal balance, allowing room for rivalry on the track, in the belief that both drivers can handle it with maturity until the end of the season. And looking at the historical past, Piastri certainly has a better record than Norris. Piastri won the Formula Renault Eurocup in 2019, Formula 3 in 2020, and Formula 2 in 2021. Norris won the European Formula 3 in 2017 and then came second in Formula 2 in 2019. However, he has fewer lower category titles than Piastri. Norris also has more Formula 1 experience, even though it sometimes seems otherwise. On the track, it seems that Piastri manages to maintain greater clarity than Norris. This is what we saw last year and in this first part of the season, although now Norris has regained that confidence he was lacking before, thanks to that update to the front suspension that gives him confidence on the front. And it allows him to push better in the curve, have more feeling on the front tires, and therefore also in braking. From this point of view, in my opinion, Alain Prost is right to say that Piastri is smarter than Norris. He has a greater tactical intelligence, and we have also seen it in various situations on the track. However, as he also said, talent alone is not enough, and neither is tactical intelligence alone. Both of these qualities are needed to become a world champion. It will be interesting to see how Piastri will react in Spa and Budapest, if he will be able to keep up with Norris's pace. He knows that it's a more open world championship than ever within the two McLaren drivers. But let's also talk about the filming day that Racing Bulls did in Imola. Racing Bulls took advantage of the World Championship break to complete the second filming day as per the regulations. Driving around Imola with the V-Carb 02. Isaac Ajara and Liam Lawson, the current team duo, took turns driving. The first day film was done early in the season with Tsunoda and Aja before the Japanese moved to Red Bull. This second session, although limited to the regulatory 200 kilometers and with Pirelli demo tires, had a clear objective to give the drivers mileage to consolidate their feeling with the single-seater. On the track, we also saw Arvid Lindblad, a young promise from the Red Bull nursery, at the wheel of the AT04, therefore of the old AlphaTauri. For him, this is another preparatory step for the official free practice, one he will compete in with Racing Bulls at Silverstone. He had already taken part in the free practice with Red Bull, finishing 14th, half a second behind Verstappen, which for a rookie was a very positive result. And be aware that Red Bull now plans to debut some important updates for Spa. In fact, Laurent Mechier, who joined the factory last week to start working with Red Bull, has already set a precise work plan that aims to target technical updates as soon as possible and also to update the simulator. The priority is twofold: to reduce the gap from McLaren in the second part of the World Championship and to give Verstappen concrete signs of technical recovery. Also to cool down the pressures from Mercedes. Even if the title is now out of reach, Red Bull still wants to fight at the top. Following initial progress, the team is optimizing the final packages using the simulator. It's about arriving at Spa-Francorchamps with a more stable and predictable car, especially in the aerodynamic setup. The main problem remains the instability between the front and rear, which penalizes confidence in the curve. Spa and Hungary will be decisive tests. The Belgian circuit could offer the ideal opportunity thanks to its fast and technical nature, while Budapest, historically less favorable, represents the challenge on consistency. Meki has also initiated a change in the management of the simulator activity in Milton Keynes, aiming to present itself from free practice, one with a competitive setup and reducing the risk of having to chase the setup during the weekend, which is something that happens too often in Red Bull. We see that Verstappen usually struggles in free practice, and manages to work on the setup and improve it over the course of free practice. However, this automatically puts you a step behind the other teams. The new course at Red Bull has started. Between technical developments and teamwork, the goal is clear: return to the protagonists and not lose reference with Verstappen. And today the simulator is not just a support, but it is a strategic element of development and performance management in Formula 1. It is essential to be ready for free practice, to test the setup, what you have prepared on the simulator. Even more so, we will see at Spa the weekend with the sprint race, and therefore there will be less time to work on the
setup.
So on free practice, you need to have a setup already ready, and Red Bull can't get this wrong. That's why Ramecci wants to have the setup ready for free practice, in Belgium, and not do like in the past race weekends, where Red Bull was always forced to chase. The use of the simulator starts already from the design phase, goes through the definition of the basic setup, and goes up to the work during the race weekends. Real-time data from free practice is instantly sent to factory simulators, where reserve drivers like Giovinazzi, Joe, or Arthur Leclerc in Ferrari work to refine the settings and provide feedback to the engineers on the circuit. Red Bull, for example, is at the forefront of integrating simulator work on the track, optimizing the technical package in real time to meet Verstappen's needs. That's why we see that Red Bull continues to grow, from Friday to Saturday. Because from the factory to the track, they managed to communicate efficiently and improve the setup of the single-seater. However, the simulator is just one part of a much larger system. Digital infrastructures, made essential by the Budget Cup, have allowed teams to centralize data management and limit travel, cutting costs. The real competitive advantage today lies in the ability to faithfully replicate the behavior of the car in a virtual environment. The more accurate the digital model, the more effective the technical and strategic choices on the track. Modern Formula One now involves more than just engines and chassis. Whoever dominates digital and simulation has an advantage. For this reason, both Red Bull and Ferrari are working on simulations. In fact, Hamilton wants to develop the 2026 car according to his own needs. After mid-season, Hamilton has a clear goal to leave his mark on the Ferrari 2026 project. The 7-time champion knows that 2025 is not the year of victories. That's why he chose to follow the solutions developed at Leclerc, adapting to a setup that pushes on the front without hiding the difficulties of adaptation. Since the inaugural Grand Prix, Hamilton has been refining elements like the power steering and engine brake, deeming them too aggressive compared to his Mercedes setup. But it's not just about adjustments. The SF25 is a difficult car, especially in fast corners, in medium-speed sections where the precarious balance severely tests the driver's confidence. Hamilton has started to converge on Leclerc's choices to seek stability, especially in qualifying. But the real goal is to contribute to the 2026 Ferrari by bringing his experience on driving dynamics, setup, and work method. The team will not build the car around a single driver, but Hamilton wants to impact the operational margins, helping the engineers to develop a more balanced and drivable single-seater. Jerome D'Ambrosio has confirmed that the work of the drivers influences the details even if the bulk remains defined by the project objectives. For Hamilton, this 2025 is a laboratory in view of the new technical cycle, aiming to put his DNA into the Ferrari that will be born with the rules. 2026. The work on 2026 has already started at Ferrari. Hamilton wants to work more on next year than this year, which has now been sacrificed as a test year to conduct experiments in view of next year. This year, Hamilton is adapting to Leclerc's setup on the SF25, which limits his driving style but allows him to gradually adjust. And we saw it also in the last race at Silverstone with less than optimal conditions. Hamilton, however, had a great race, showcasing his skills and finishing 4th. But let's see how the 2026 regulations will change and what are the challenges of the project. The removal of the motor generator unit, heat, the triple contribution from the electric part, and new proportions between the thermal and hybrid engine have raised strong concerns among the manufacturers. The first simulations have highlighted a real risk of unbalanced, inefficient, and expensive engines. Mercedes and Audi are opposed to any revision of the regulations, forcing the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to continue on a path that many in the paddock consider a dead end. The first test session in Barcelona will be closed to the public, indicating the Federation's shared concerns. Benzelaim has acknowledged the problem and anticipated that the future of the power unit will have to change course even before Generation 2.0 becomes stable. The idea of reducing costs by standardizing some components, including transmission or introducing a single supplier for fuels, however, seems difficult to implement given the commercial logic of the current partners. On a technical level, the line is interested in a return from hybrid V8 ES, considered more manageable and sustainable, with integrated electric power, but without the conceptual excesses of the current project. It's clear the automotive market has backtracked on electric, and so is Formula One. And the Power Unit 2026 risks being a failed parenthesis, too expensive and not effective enough. The main manufacturers and potential new entries to the World Championship see the project more as a misstep than an opportunity. And the 2026 cars risk being up to 4 seconds slower than the current ones. And this could be a real drama for us Formula One fans. Let's also see the reason behind this concern. Several projects struggle to reach the aerodynamic load levels set by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. The goal set by the Federation, about 85% of the current load, seems too optimistic today. According to some simulations, lap times could increase by 3 to 4 seconds. The issue extends beyond performance. Pirelli designs the new tires using data supplied by the teams. But the aerodynamic simulations do not converge, and this also complicates the design of the tires. A vicious circle in which the team and supplier need precise information from each other. The worst-case scenario is that one team finds the right solution before the others, creating a gap that's hard to close. The most optimistic alternative is that the variety of concepts leads to a more open championship with different winners based on the characteristics of the tracks. A bit like in 2017 between Ferrari and Mercedes. Finally, engineers hope that the new cars, although less aerodynamically driven, will be simpler and more straightforward to develop compared to the current ground effect ones. so as to facilitate those who will have to chase. And it will be interesting to see how the 2026 single-seaters will be developed if there will actually be this difference of 3-4 seconds, which seems very alarming. But it's also true that in 2014, they saw the cars less competitive compared to 2013. In fact, it took F1 many years to regain credibility. After that technical change, we'll see if the same thing happens next year as well. But we also need to talk about Felipe Massa's statements at the Goodwood Festival. Massa has discussed the Ferrari F2008 again, revisiting the infamous 2008 World Championship incident. With a sharp smile, the Brazilian defined 2008 as his best year. And he reiterated the belief that that title was unjustly taken from him due to the Singapore crash gate. Massa has been arguing for years that the results of that Grand Prix skewed by Nelson Piquet Jr.'s deliberate crash should be annulled, resulting in a change to the final standings. The legal battle continues. And the next step will come in October, when the King's Bench Division of the English High Court will review Massa's request and decide whether to open the trial. Despite the slim chances of a real change in ranking, Massa continues to pursue the case, highlighting the economic and personal toll of his long battle. Obviously, Massa's case is unlikely to be reviewed as the 2008 World Championship has already been awarded to Hamilton. It's odd that Felipe Massa still discusses himself and the World Championship at the Goodwood Festival 17 years later. For better or worse, a lot of time has passed. If he wanted to intervene, he could have done it earlier. Now it's too late. But let's also talk about the situation at Alpine. In fact, the return of Franco Colapinto to Formula 1 is proving to be difficult, taking over mid-season in place of Jack Doohan. The Argentine has not yet scored any points and is the only driver on the grid with 0 in the standings. In an Alpine that also challenges Gasly, Colapinto has repeated the errors that lost him his Williams seat in 2024. Persistent rumors suggest Valtteri Bottas may arrive as early as 2025. But the chief executive officer of Renault Argentina, Pablo Sibiglia, confirmed to the Lovis channel that Colapinto will stay at least until the end of the championship. The Silverstone weekend worsened the current situation with the qualifying accident, the Grand Prix not even started, and rumors of a burnt clutch before the start. His stay beyond 2025 seems increasingly uncertain, while Alpine continues to score points only with Gasly and evaluates alternatives in view of the new regulatory cycle. We know that Briatore is not at all happy with Colapinto's performances. However, according to the chief executive officer of Renault Argentina, he should stay until the end of the season. The chief executive officer of Renault Argentina is biased, and with Briatore leading the team, anything is possible. But we'll see how it goes on. Certainly, Bottas is one of the #1 candidates to debut in Alpine next year and therefore make his return to Formula 1. Toto Wolff said he can do it. In fact, Mercedes has given its availability. And Briatore wants drivers who are consistent and who score points a bit like Gasly this season. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any news. That's all from Rastro on Formula 1 and Ferrari. See you next time.